Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM, and thank you for joining us on today's program. On our show for today, I have here with me in the studio Miss Stephie Gumbs. She is definitely a phenomenal young woman, one who has a great passion for this island, but one filled with gems, please, gems as well. And in addition to that, we will be particularly focusing on, I guess in a broad sense, looking at development of the French side in particular. As one of the things I try to do is try to bring on different professionals from the other side of the island, because I think it's very important that we get a better understanding of how we live, on this rock, as we sometimes say. What are the things we have in common? What are the differences we have as well? But I think in getting a better understanding of our experiences, it will definitely help us to shape our identity, better understand our history, which in turn will help us understand where we are going, or come to a consensus at least on where we should go. So Stephie, I would like to thank you so much for being on the program, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, great. So before we get into the meat of the matter, can you tell us a bit about yourself? And one thing I'm curious about as well is if you can share with us some memories of growing up here in St. Martin.
Yes, sure. So I'm Stephie. I grew up in Spring, Concordia. And my parents have moved 10 years ago to French Quarter, which is also where we have roots, or family have roots. My father is from St. Martin and my mother is from Guadeloupe. So I grew up in a French-speaking household, and I played with my English-speaking friends at recess before going to school, back to the class in French. So that is my linguistic and island-wise background. What can I say more? I was on the island until more or less 18, where I left to study in Paris to a school called Sciences Po. There I did my what we call my humanities, and I have a master's degree in international private and public law. And for the past 4 years, I've been working as a consultant in cybersecurity. I also have, as you've said, a great passion for this land, and so in my free time, or I make some free time in order to, do just that, work on what I can bring to my island. And so in 2014, with a few friends, we created an association of students who live in France called Pélicarus. I was involved for 3 years. Then I got back to focusing on school, etc., and started my professional life. And since 2020, with the lockdown, I had time, like a lot of people, to do something different. And so I started reading all the books I had on St. Martin, still living in France. I had a few books, I took some notes, and I noticed that what I was keeping the most were dates. And so I was kind of having a timeline, and I was like, I need to share this timeline with the people. And so I created an Instagram and Facebook page called On This Day in St. Martin.
Yeah. Okay, so that's quite a lot for a young soul. But that's great, because then that means we definitely have a good bit of stuff that we can get into. One of the things that first comes to mind based on what you shared is, of course, that one thing I've witnessed amongst many of us, especially across the border, which is, while in school the system is very rigid in terms of the French, everyone speaks English. It's a one mother tongue. English is a one mother tongue on the island, and you have this sort of duality that exists where identities are trying to, where identities perhaps clash, and in some cases, some are not able to kind of merge or adapt.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm curious about is if you could share details on your observation or even experience on the code switching that takes place, and how does that impact a life, of one, let's say, who's trying to make it in a basically a French colony.
Yeah. So indeed, as you said it, Samartan English is not only our mother tongue; it's also our lingua franca, meaning that even those whose mothers don't speak English, they end up speaking Samartan English because that's the language that you hear everywhere. And so you have to be, depending on how you say water, you're being treated differently at the shop, or, well, not differently, but the person know where to, in what case to in what box to put you.
Yeah.
And so it's an adaptation from the classroom in French, and then the classroom for standard English, and then to what you're going to speak with your friends, etc. And so I think it makes you aware of your surrounding, of where you are, who you're speaking to, and I don't know, just making sure that you're being understood. Because I've noticed that people in Saint Martin, even beyond just speaking French, English, or Dutch, they also speak a little bit of Creole, a little bit of Spanish. Because if you see someone and you feel like they might be more comfortable in one of these languages, you'll try to switch to be able to have a conversation with them. And so I'm always really impressed by our adaptability, which is not always valued in institutions or administrations where there's an official language such as French. French is a language where, the speakers are very precise about how you should say things. You're quite ridiculed if you make mistakes. Even people who are from the south of France are ridiculed because they have an accent that is different from not the language of the majority in terms of number, but the hegemonic, Central Parisian accent, let's say. And so, there's a way that you should speak and a way that you shouldn't speak, and depending on how you're able to adopt the right accent, then you will have more or less doors opening for you. Like in some professional contexts, I was learning how to conduct first level interviews in a process that have multiple levels. And so the person that was at the same rank as me, I was like shadowing him for an interview, and he was like, what did you think? And I told him like the guy seemed competent, he seemed like comfortable talking with us, etc. But he had noticed that he was using a way of speaking that could be too colloquial, that wasn't formal enough. For those who happen to speak French, sometimes you can punctuate your sentences with tu vois to ensure that the person is still following you on the conversation, which just means
Mm-hmm.
And because we have two you, the formal one and the colloquial one, so the vous and the tu is the like colloquial one. The guy was saying vous to us, but when he was saying this little add of he was using the tu, and so he was not aligning the pronoun he was using for us with the expression, And for me, that's not a big deal because we know that it's an expression, or he's not really talking to us. He's just like, it's just like what you add at the end of a sentence. Yes, yeah. But to him, like it was like a mark of lower speech, And I think that the guy was like, French wasn't his first language, and you can also see it on like how he looked like. And so it really reaffirmed to me the fact that in France you really have to speak a certain way to basically be recognized.
That says so much because language can definitely be weaponized basically. And you just see it in so many cases where brilliant people are left without certain opportunities just because they don't fit into that language box basically. And what makes it sad is for me, having at least observed very few cases where people were in a sense relegated just because they weren't able to be top of the class, and due to the difficulties that they had adapting with the French language or even the French system in general.
But you know what is also strange is that sometimes it's not even about being too formal, because when you hear the French that people from former African colonies, former French colonies in Africa, they speak in a very formal way, they have an excellent quality of French. But in France, in any language, you have this way of speaking that is not the written way, that is more like familiar. And so people in France would not feel necessarily comfortable speaking with you if you don't use like hip expressions or like basic level French. They would feel like you're trying to appear as more than you are, and you do things like that.
French than the French.
Yeah, that you're doing too much, basically. Like that's the fact, in all languages we tend to take off certain syllables or things like that, and so if you don't do it like them, then they kind of feel like alienated from you, and so it's really the power of adaptation to know what you can say in certain contexts. And it's like, for instance, me, when I speak like in a familiar way, well, I would switch certain words for English, because that's the word that, if the English comes easier to me, then I put the word in English. But I cannot do that when I live in France, because it sounds like I'm feeling myself because I can speak English better than them or something like that, knowing that the French have quite a poor level of English, And
I'm also just a refusal, maybe, than poor level.
Yeah, but it's
for English.
I can see like how I speak English when I'm in France. If I'm having a conversation with someone in Saint Martin, if I'm having an international conversation at the job with English speakers, or if I'm having a conversation in English with French speakers. Like I will Frenchify my accent if I'm talking with French speakers, and if they are my colleagues that I see every day, because I know that it will make our relationship better for them not to feel like I'm putting on an accent when we're having like day-to-day conversations,
Gotcha.
So it's
Well, one thing
a lot of navigation.
Basically, one thing also I think would be interesting to get your take on is, well, the fact that your dad was an educator. I think he's retired, right?
Yes, he's retired.
So your dad was an educator, and you said your mom is from Guadeloupe. Was French the main? How to say? I guess was. Well, in what sense then did they shape your Caribbean identity, especially even with you adapting to your Guadeloupean heritage as well, given that you're based and you're growing up and you're living in Saint Martin?
Yes. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I sometimes believe that mothers tend to shape the identity of their children more than their fathers because of the role. Because they usually take more space in the household, and take care of the children, etc. And I can remember when I say that they take more space in the household. For instance, if you come in my house on a regular day, you will have a Guadeloupe Première, the radio station Guadeloupe Première, playing, and so. Guadeloupe was very present in the house through the form of the radio or the news that we watch at night, or basically my mother and her accent and her cooking and things like that. And for any holidays, well, most holidays, yes, she would send me to Guadeloupe to my grandmother and to my cousins, and so I really got to enjoy Guadeloupe and Guadeloupean culture and know about it. That being said, because I live in Saint Martin and that, my extended family is actually quite close-knit, I used to spend more time, of course, with my cousin in Saint Martin, experiencing life in Saint Martin, and going to Guadeloupe as a Saint Martiner, you always hear things like, "Oh, you're from Saint Martin, what can you say a few words in English?" or things like that, And so, being in Guadeloupe, like even my time spent in Guadeloupe, I was still reminded that I'm actually from Saint Martin. And for the longest a while, Guadeloupeans would mock my accent in Creole, saying that it is very French. Actually, even as a kid, when I was speaking French in public, people would think that I was actually a metropolitan because I had a very proper, I guess, French. So yeah, I'm still I feel like I have a good balance because of the fact that I grew up in Saint Martin, in a Saint Martin family and community with a Guadeloupean mother and regular trips to Guadeloupe.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, of course, definitely come to mind, if you choose not to share too much, I understand as well, but did you ever find it annoying, given that, you grew up in a political background, that, your dad is someone who's well-known, well-recognized, and maybe people may have tried putting pressure on you to remind you, like, hey, Stephie, remember who your father is, or just, you gotta be as great as your dad, or, some things along that line.
I would say that...
like dealing with that?
Because my father was already in the public eye when I was born, there wasn't much of a, it was already the context, and I just assumed that in Saint Martin, everybody knows everybody. Well, in fact, many people actually knew my dad and, and these kind of things. And then, of course, there was a progression in his political presence, let's say, because it's not the career, it's not the job, so his... Voila, what he's done in politics, and it coincided with my teen years, and it's the years where you're
rebellious.
Yeah, I wasn't really rebellious, but you're kind of testing the waters, and you want to do more and stuff. And I wasn't really stopped from going out or things like that, but I was still made aware that I should have a certain conduct. Not to bring shame to my family, basically.
Don't taint the family name.
Exactement. And so, it's still it didn't stop me from doing anything basically. Because I'm not my personality is not disrespectful and rebellious, and so. And then when people, especially with the school that I've done, it's a school that usually prepares high public servants, and many, almost all the presidents of France have gone through that school. And so people really got on that narrative that I would be, I would follow my father's footsteps.
And become a politician.
Yeah. And
have you ever thought of it though?
I thought of it in the sense that I'm not interested. Yes, okay. I've asked myself the question and I've determined an answer.
Yeah. I guess what I say is you kind of saw what your father did with it. Maybe you're not.
Yeah, and also everybody have their own path,
exactly,
so path, and so. I don't have to for me. Politics is wider than what people usually see. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm already doing politics because I'm doing stuff for my country. I'm contributing to society, and I'm not that I'm shaping, but I'm contributing to shape our community and the conversations that we're having. So for me, that is politics. To me, being an elected official is not the only way to do politics and to have a role in your community.
That's right.
And for sure, that's something that he transmitted to me, the fact of being involved in your community.
Service.
Because besides politics, he's also in associations. He was in the Comité Carnavales, so the Carnival Committee. He was in the Grand Case MJC Cultural Center team and things like that. So yeah, service in community is just a part of my life because I've seen grown-ups around me doing it.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would definitely love for you to delve into is as it relates to going abroad to study. Often, especially with the recent election, there was much talk about the fact that to date, there's no university on the island, and many students had to go to Guadeloupe, but especially to France. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about one, especially considering the forming of Pelicarus, that organization. What were some of the difficulties that students had to navigate through, but also, as a diaspora, how connected is it, and what was the type of efforts or work that went into kind of maintaining, that Saint-Martiness abroad in France in particular?
Yeah. So, first part of your question is the difficulties. Well, one of the main challenges was for the students was preparation, being prepared and like going abroad and like having the financial preparation, knowing what to expect when they leave, and basically being aware of the cost of living, of the community they were going to enter, etc. So too often we were meeting with students who didn't necessarily have the family or the friends to inform them with this stuff, and they were really starting from far. And so we were trying, one of the main objectives was to try to reduce the shock that it would be to be abroad and to help in the preparation. We sometimes had to like hit them with a reality check when they would tell us, yes, my school is in Paris. I would like to have like a 1-bedroom apartment not too far from my school that is in the center of Paris for less than 500 euros.
Very idealistic.
Yeah, we were like, that's actually not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so to like see young people being met with such disillusions, it's always hard to like break a bad news to someone,
right.
Especially when it will affect like a few years of their life, and like so a lot of reality checks to offer to the young people. And also in terms of keeping the diaspora connected, it was kind of ambivalent because, we were students, and I know that for myself, I had seen associations from other territories that were lobbying to the Ministry of Overseas Territories, or who were doing very institutional jobs. And so at first, I didn't really have in mind the fact that you're also supposed to build a community of people who can find a joyful place that reminds them of home. But naturally, with more people coming in, etc., it naturally became that because, we want to like speak English when we're together. We want to eat our local food and things like that. So we really had this double hat of being both the representative of students from Saint Martin in France in the face of facing the authorities or like institutions, and then creating and harvesting this community of young people.
Yeah, because then the next thing that comes to mind is that which I've heard many people share, which is also when you go away and you realize that you kind of don't know that much about your own country. I know, like particularly in your case, you're one who was made aware through stories, connections, and stuff, and your search for it. But in many others, especially more so with the French system, you're not taught about yourself.
No, you're not. Well, you do have a small booklet about Caribbean history, but because the French mainly see Guadeloupe and Martinique and French Guyana, then the booklet would focus on that. They would have like one photo of Saint Martin, which I don't remember, in the history pages, and one in the geography pages that was the actually Juliana Airport. So it wasn't much, and you kind of feel like, because you're met with all these different people with different communities, and some of them are so sure of who they are and where they're from, and you feel like at a disadvantage, not being able to present yourself with the same confidence that they do.
Yeah.
And so it really encourages you to look more into look into your identity, yourself, and figure out these things. Yes.
Yeah, and which of course led to, for example, on this SXM, being a resource, and even Millie, which we will get into a bit later. But one of the things I realized, while speaking to you, is the fact that we're like that bridge generation. And I say bridge in the sense of, on our side, we experience growing up in the Netherlands Antilles, and now, but more so as an adult, you're witnessing what it is to have this autonomous status. And then for you guys, it was being in the commune, growing up, hearing about the commune and the mayor and blah, 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 and now the issue of the collectivity. So I'm curious about your take on, through perhaps discussions with your peers and so forth, on the level of information that you've received on how your society functions, but also in a sense of how the approach is right now to actually ensure that people understand, like where as a nation, where do we stand in that sense?
I'm not sure I can answer this question in a way that is that reflects the general
Sentiment.
public's view, because like I literally have one of the person that like worked towards the collectivity as a parent, and so I was always informed of how things changed and etc. But it's true that in school we weren't taught anything about our status. I would hope and assume that now it has changed, but I cannot say for sure.
Definitely, got you.
What I can say is that I noticed that people tend to idealize the past because of the situation that we're in now and the challenges that we're facing, which is a common mistake. And so we always have to remember why we did the choice that we made, and that I know that people are frustrated because of the lack of perceived progress. But as like a country takes time to move, it's like a big boat. So sometimes, or even maybe like a tectonic plate, or it's not things that you don't always see progress by sight. Political and institutional time is longer than like our own pace. So I understand why people tend to neglect the progress that we've made, or I don't know how to say, but individual situations are very frustrating, and so it's normal that people find themselves not seeing the glass half full, basically.
Yeah. Well, I guess another aspect on that note then would probably be the media. Then look at radio is one, but even newspapers and stuff. The way in which narrative is shaped then on what's happening, but also in what. I guess I'd say in what view, because I'm curious about, particularly with the papers. Do we have local papers or locals working in the newspapers on Ireland, and how many of them are written with the understanding of with a relation to the population, and not necessarily this sort of colonial command and framing of what's happening and the significance of it as well.
Well, we have a few local newspapers in French, edited on the French side, but I'm not sure how many people who have long lived on Saint Martin write in it. Some, most heads of publications have lived in Saint Martin for a long time. But as you can guess from the vocabulary that I'm using, they're not necessarily rooted in like the community, the general community, or And so sometimes this is not it doesn't impede them from doing actual relevant work, because local, like anyone has their biases, how to say it, and the research of objectivity by journalists can hinder their own capacity to recognize that they are subjective, even while trying to report in an objective manner.
Yeah, I got you. Mm-hmm.
And for me, we can have good quality journalism, whether the person is anchored, is a local or not, if they remain professional and, I wouldn't say open-minded, but try to recognize the biases they might have when writing.
Yeah, that's what I say. Yeah.
I'm trying to be careful, and choose my words.
That's fine. But well, with that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News with Ralph Contab on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Miss Stephie Gumbs. So, as you shared earlier in the introduction, Stephie, you have your master's, I believe you said, in international and private law.
Yes.
And presently, you're a consultant as it relates to cybersecurity.
Yes.
And one of the things I'm curious about is, what is it like working in France, as far as the work environment, living there, etc. But I'm asking that in particular because, oftentimes you hear conversations about the need for, one, the brain drain, but also the need for students to go abroad, get the experience, come back home. But, one of the difficulties you face is sometimes the relevancy may not be there, but of course, maybe the lifestyle you've been adapted to, the salary scale as well, and all those factors. So, can you share that with us as well?
Well, like living anywhere, it has its advantages and disadvantages, inconvenience. So, of course, we can feel like having public transportation available, having high salaries, or the excitement of living in a big city. Well, these are advantages, and then you have like the disadvantage of living far from your family, not having access to nature, or other things that as you grow up, or depending on your personality, you might value more than the advantages that I previously presented. And so to me, it's really, the keyword is just lifestyle. You have to decide if you want to live in a big city, make a lot of money despite living in the cold, but being able to afford a vacation in the sun, or if you are willing to make less money, but live in the sun actually all year long, So, yeah, to me, it's any place you go to. Also, like feeling like being a minority in a place that is racist, let's say, it is not a good feeling either. The ease that comes with knowing that people won't look at you because of your skin color is not something you can neglect. It feels good not to like look over your shoulder because of that. So
I can imagine. And one thing too that comes to mind is, would you say you've ever experienced fears of even terrorism, given that you've seen a growing threats in Europe, but and then even just nationalism, which tends to eventually end up with some sort of terroristic activities as well.
Yeah, because I live in Paris, and I used to work in the equivalent of I don't know, the city of London, or the city, like basically it's called La Défense, and that's where all the big companies are. And so all these towers and everything, you would sometime say like this could be actually targeted by terrorist activity, because you have all these companies that work in the energy field, or you even have the company that goes that prepares space rockets or things like that. And so yeah, it can be stressful, and because there has been terrorist attacks, you sometimes like think twice before going in a place, not only because of what could happen, but also because of the procedures that they implement to ensure security. Like during a long time after the 2015 attacks, you like had to open your bag to go into places, or you would be on the street, and you would it's a military with his big gun would be walking next to you, or things like that. So you were kind of always reminded that you're in a state of emergency. So
yeah,
it's special.
Especially in the, which again, I guess it goes back to the question of the lifestyle. We prefer being in the sun, where I don't know, your biggest issue probably would be.
Well, traffic is a big issue.
Yeah,
and cost of living too. That's two big issues that we have here, I believe.
Yeah, cost of living, and well, at least on our side, it one of the main issues we've had for sure is the political instability, which has led to a lot of other stuff.
Yes.
So hopefully, that is like one of the main things we're looking to curb. But on a slightly more positive note, in a sense, as we're speaking, there will be an event that will be held, although this program is being recorded before it is held. But you played an instrumental role in it, which is the Lights On Freedom Fighters event.
Yes.
In display that's happening in Marigot. Can you share with us what was it like coming up with the theme of this, and also the purpose and the process as well?
So because I've been doing On This Day in Saint Martin for 2 years now, sometimes in my research I find names or stories, but they don't fit in the format of a dated event. And so I would collect these stories and wonder like how to highlight them. And I ended up with 4 people that I found like went well together, and these were people that I had found in the written archives as well as in our oral tradition. And these people were Wantete Loke from the oral tradition. Then we have François Auguste Perrinon, who was an abolitionist that lived in Saint Martin. Then we had Kwashiba, who was a Maroon who ran away, or swam away, or navigated away to Anguilla. And then we have George the Poisoner, who didn't run away from the plantation, but committed various crimes of poisoning. And so I was like, look at these 4 people. They fought in their own way to resist and restore their dignity and do their own thing, basically, you know. And initially I was just like, okay, they go well together. How I could like make them work together. And the first thing I was like was, okay, let me do like a photo shoot where people would like, we would recreate like an outfit similar to what the person would be wearing, and like I would add a text to explain who is the person, etc. And so I discussed it very casually with the tourist office when we were working on another project, and they were like, no, this cannot be pictures, it needs to be alive. The people need to see those ancestors or past lives, like in reality. A picture is not physical enough. You should do an event. And so they were involved from the get-go and very excited with the idea of highlighting people of the past. And so the project evolved to end up being a live show where each person, each character, in this case Wantete Loke, would be incarnated through an actress who would tell her story, the story of the person that they're incarnating. Mm-hmm. And this experience is enhanced and made even more magical through mapping, which is the projection of animation on a building or on a shoe or a car, but like on a surface. Yeah. And so it really adds to like the extraordinary, the more than reality nature of the experience, because you're not only having a theatrical show, you're also having one that is helped with technology. And of course you can imagine that things are easier to represent when you do animation than in reality. You know, if certain effects are easier to be made like through technology, of course. Mm-hmm. So it's really I think that the people are gonna like it
It's a great
a
combination.
lot. Yeah.
And by the way, can you also share, who are you working with and
Yes.
the partners involved?
So it's an event by the tourist office. I was the one who came with the thematic. I'm doing research, creative writing, and a bit of coordination for the actors, etc. The creative director, who is helping the actors with their movement on the scene, or finding costumes, doing makeup, etc., and having props as well, is Stacey Ann Taylor. Then we have on the technical side, yes.
Yeah.
The actress, now that we've revealed it, is Luciana Raspai. Amazing. And on the technical side, we have Nozin Prod, that is the company doing the animation projection.
Okay, cool. Now, one of the things...
let me just add that it's in 2 languages. It's in French and in Saint Martin English. So even as... I wrote it in standard English, but the actress was like, to make it real, like... Wanted it wouldn't speak like standard English, and so she took it upon herself to translate it from standard English to Saint Martino.
That's cool.
And so and even as we're having these discussions on where we want to take our mother tongue, I think that when we will be looking for material and art and things in Saint Martin English, this will be a superb resource.
Yeah, and I do love the fact that, just as we spoke about ways in which while we may have not have gotten certain information or being aware of different historical events and so forth, because, for example, like Georgia Poisoner, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, we definitely didn't learn that in school, but we're finding creative ways now of relaying our story.
Yeah,
and I think that's really amazing, and I love that the tourist office itself is involved, because sometimes the approach generally in certain Caribbean islands, we see it here on our island sometimes, is this push to, in a sense, like Americanize the Caribbean, if you get what I'm saying, but. We are using, our local story to share our culture, our heritage.
Yes.
And that matters.
Except Wantete Loke, who I said is from the oral tradition. All we have found them like in written archives, so we know that they existed. My work is just to imagine the rest of their story beyond what is written, because of course they didn't write their story, they didn't write their name anywhere, and the people who wrote it didn't really care to tell more about like where they're from, etc. And that's where we have to complete the archives with imagination in order to reappropriate our narrative and our stories.
Yeah, and the good thing is that there's that commonality when you look at history that can help you even add some. While it may not be written, but you can still add a fact.
Yes, of course.
Add a fact.
Like I cannot say that Wantete Loke came to Saint Martin on a space rocket,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or what I did is that I in her story, I said that she came to an island nearby first, and then she was bought on the slave market, and she was then bought to Saint Martin. And the reason why I said it this way is because Statia and St. Kitts were bigger islands in terms of import of enslaved people, and so The resource that I use is slavevoyage.org, which is a website where you can consult a lot of archives and a database basically on the transatlantic slave trade. And I noticed that they had more boats coming to Statia or St. Kitts than to St. Martin. There were some, but it seemed to me that it was more frequent to have people go by enslaved people on these islands and then come with them to Saint Martin.
Yeah.
So it's a choice that I made because of what I've read.
Yes, yeah. to help frame it. So even with that, I was going into my next point where, your background, like study wise, is political and legal, but you're a very creative person, for as long as I know you to be creative with a lot of your ideas. So I'm curious about your process or what helps shape that as well, whether it's your writing or some of the ideas or themes and projects that you come up with, because you even see it sometimes with the posters and stuff you made. It translates. It really comes across as people more so think you're a creative artist opposed to someone who has a lot of it.
It's funny that you say that, because I have a hard time qualifying myself as an artist, maybe a creative, but not an artist, because to me an artist is a channel through which outwardly messages go through and they translate it into art. And I don't have this experience,
Nicely said.
My experience is that I have things to say. I want things to be done. And I don't want to ask someone, because then so I have to push myself to do it myself. And so I end up creating things, because I want things to be, I want what I create, what I put out to be entertaining. I want it to be interesting. And so, that's how I end up creating things. But I do have to admit that in my childhood, I did a lot of arts. So I did music for from 6-7 years old to 17 years old. I was in music classes playing the flute.
Which you still do.
Yeah. I had drawing classes too. I even got to illustrate a small book that where the stories were written by older school children. I did dancing. I started ballet at 4 years old, and then I did modern jazz, hip hop, African dances, etc. So let's say that my upbringing stimulated. I also did theater, so really my upbringing cultivated my creative side, and
Gotcha.
so it's not new to me to have to express certain things through art. It's just that I do it. For instance, my writing, because of my studies, I often thought that my writing was academic, that I wrote for knowledge.
Yeah.
But because I want to communicate messages to the most people as possible, to the general public, then I have to present it in an appealing way, and that's where my imagination comes in.
Yeah.
And the way I was writing the monologues of these actors, I realized quite late that it was me who was gonna write theater, a play, because at a phase of the project, it was just each character would be in a little box, in a black box, and you would come in the black box and they would tell you their story, And to me, I would just have to brief the actors with the knowledge on Wanteteloke, and they would be able to improvise based on the knowledge that they would acquire. But it became such a show and a live show, I realized that no, I actually had to write the monologue that they will say and be the one telling writing this story. And so it's a bit by mistake that I became the writer of the monologue and the story of Wanteteloke.
Gotcha. Now, of course, I can definitely hear your passion in all that you're sharing, but also, I know one of the things that sometimes pose a challenge is in trying to manage what you have. One, besides the work that you're paid for, you have On This Day, and then you have Melee, and then you have other things you like to see get done and stuff. So I guess, how do you also organize and weigh the way in which you plan and manage your projects, your passion?
Yes. So one thing that I tell myself is that you cannot have different results if you do the same things. And so that's when we're on a Saturday morning. I don't feel like waking up, like I don't feel like starting my day, etc. But I know that I have things to do, and to have to achieve certain things, certain goals, I need to work on them, and so I cannot sleep as long as I want to. So discipline is very important, even when you're not. You don't want to, you have to remember that you're doing it for a reason, and that it's only discipline and regularity that will bring you these results. Another tool that I use a lot to fight procrastination is accountability, meaning that once I've announced that I will do something on social media or to friends or anything, then I have to do it. If I keep it for myself, I won't be doing anything. And it's the same with On This Day SXM. Like, I cannot procrastinate and say that I will do it later, because if I don't do it the day it's supposed to be, then it will be next year.
Yeah.
So
and you don't know what will happen later.
Voilà. And so I use I put myself in situations where I have to do certain things. I have to prioritize them to get them, put them out. It's the same thing with any project. I would ask, when do you need it for? Because if I don't know when it's for, then it's going to be for in 6 months, I need a deadline, so that even if it's a personal deadline,
Deadlines matter, yes.
Yeah, I need a deadline to push me, because if not, the life goes on, and there will be other things, and to give an activity the priority, I need to know when it's for. And lastly, I also don't take it too seriously, because sometimes I have a date, and I'm like, okay, I haven't posted in 2 weeks. It would be good if I could share this story on that date, because the next one is going to be 2 weeks after that one. But I don't have I have some information. I found a small paragraph in a book. I have no other source to complete it, and it's an event that's not that big for St. Martin. And sometimes Stephie, you have other things to do. You're too tired. This post is not going to perform well anyways. So just take it easy. You'll share some stories or things like that. But sometimes it's I'm not saving lives, okay? It's okay if I don't post, especially because social media and the algorithm make you perform so badly so that you can pay for advertising, and so oftentimes it's frustrating. So I really try, despite applying discipline, to tell myself, does that really serve the purpose you've set out, the goals, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, one of the things then, given the time that I'd like you to share is one, well, I also want to let people know that you can please follow On This Day St. Martin, On This Day SXM on Facebook and Instagram. Go ahead and follow, and you'll find nice bite-sized Martin history bits, different things that happen on different days, which really matters, and is really beneficial and helpful. But also considering, also with the podcast with Millie, I'm curious about how would you explain your process, of studying St. Martin history for someone out there who wants to also delve into, the island's history? What was your approach? And go ahead.
So I have a few sources that I almost always look into. And then I'm aware that of their biases. For instance, I have a resource that is the history of St. Martin by Dr. Hartog. But I believe it was written in the 80s. And since then, the way we tell history is not the same. Also, like some information have like come up, like the real date of the abolition of slavery on the French side. And so, like I try to remember that this is how Saint Martin was told in the 80s, you know. And so then I mostly do research in, like I said, either my books or internet. We should not underestimate how beneficial of a resource it is, even for Saint Martin, because we tend to think, oh, so they don't have this information in Saint Martin and blah blah. But sometimes you can find it, yeah. And if I cannot find it in this resource, also I always discuss it with my dad to see what he thinks about it, because he's also into history, and so. Sometimes he would tell me, well, you should talk to this person or this person, and then I would consult them as well. That's my process.
Okay. And then finally, what has stood out to you the most in your 2 years now doing On This Day XXM?
What has stood out the most? The fact that history is more than dates. It's actually like movements and processes, and dates just let you know how to say, it's just a testimony of a wider period. But to really understand a society, you have to look beyond the dates to find like the global movements of society and how it behaves.
All right then. Thank you so much, Stephie, for that response, and thank you so much for being on the program. While there's so much more we can discuss, I definitely look forward to having you back on when you're back home. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us on today's program, and be sure to tune in again tomorrow. Take care.